Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the prophets who prophesied to the northern kingdom, Israel. And we're getting into the text of Jonah today, and we're going to read chapter 1. As we said when we introduced Jonah, it's a singularity. There's nothing like it really in Scripture. It's the only one of the minor prophets that is a straight up narrative, a story. His prophetic message is brief, and the 4 chapters are the 4 scenes, the 4 acts of the story. So let's read chapter 1, and we'll talk about it today. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah rose up to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. So he went down to Joppa, found a ship which was going to Tarshish, paid the fare, went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. And the Lord hurled a great wind on the sea, and there was a great storm on the sea, so that the ship was about to break up. And the sailors became afraid, and every man cried to his God, and they threw the cargo which was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone below into the hold of the ship, and he'd lain down and fallen sound asleep. So the captain approached him and said, How is it that you are sleeping? Get up, call on your God. Perhaps your God will be concerned about us so that we will not perish. And each man said to his mate, Come, let us cast lots so that we may learn on whose account this calamity has struck us. And they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Then they said to him, Tell us now, on whose account has this calamity struck us? What is your occupation? Where did you come from? What is your country? From what people are you? And he said to them, I'm a Hebrew, and I fear Yahweh, God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. Then the men became extremely frightened, and they said to him, How could you do this? For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord, because he had told them that. So they said to him, What should we do that the sea may become calm for us? For the sea was becoming increasingly stormy. And he said to them, Pick me up and throw me into the sea. Then the sea will be calm for you. For I know that on account of me, this great storm has come upon you. However, the men rowed desperately to return to land, but they could not, for the sea was becoming even stormier against them. Then they called on the Lord and said, We earnestly pray, O Lord, do not let us perish on account of this man's life. Do not put innocent blood on us. For you, O Yahweh, they're praying to Yahweh here, has done as you have pleased. So they picked up Jonah, threw him into the sea, and the sea stopped its raging. Then the men feared Yahweh greatly, and offered a sacrifice to Yahweh, and made vows. And the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the stomach of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. There's so much here, so much that connects with so much else. Jonah, the son of Amittai, we know from 2 Kings chapter 14:25 that he prophesied in the northern kingdom during the reign of Jeroboam II. This is the last period of prosperity and power that the northern kingdom enjoyed before they were hauled off into Assyrian captivity. So this is happening in about the 700s. This is in the 700s BC. This is a great slice of life. It tells us a bit about seafaring during that time. Seafaring was happening all over the Mediterranean. These are the days. This would have been about the time, with give or take a century or so, of the Trojan War. And so seafaring is not quite as primitive as we might think at this time. Tarshish, that's Spain, that's Gibraltar, that's as far as you can go in the Mediterranean before heading out into the unknown of the open ocean. He's trying to get away from God as far as he can. Why? Why is he doing this? Because he's a prophet of God. Because he knows what Amos knows and Hosea knows. Those other 2 prophets of the northern kingdom whose lives overlap his life. Um, he knows that the Assyrian Empire is going to haul off the northern kingdom into captivity. And now there's a possibility that God is going to destroy the capital city and perhaps avert the judgment upon the northern kingdom that they all see coming. And so he's not just a guy who is um, difficult, stubborn. He's someone who's trying to save his nation and his people. And he's willing to die to do that because he tells the sailors to throw him into the sea. Um, it's interesting how all these men turn to their gods. They find out that he is a servant of Yahweh. That frightens them. Um, they are loath to throw him into the sea, even though he tells them to do that. Why didn't he just jump into the sea? Maybe he thinks that's wouldn't help. That's another way of him trying to escape God. But if they throw him into the sea, then God will be merciful to them. I don't know what his thought process was, but he tells them, "You have to throw me into the sea." And when they do, the sea is calm, um, and the Lord prepares a great fish to swallow Jonah whole. Um, so there's so many connections to so many things that happen in the New Testament. Um, we see these sailors casting lots, and of course, Jesus. We've talked about the sign of Jonah. They cast lots for Jesus' clothing. Um, the belly of the whale, 3 days, 3 nights. The belly of the great fish. Is it a whale or is it a great fish? In the Greek New Testament, in Matthew chapter 12, verse 40, it's called a whale. But human taxonomy is human taxonomy in a human construct. This living being that swallowed Jonah whole was prepared by God specially for this purpose. So it's pointless for us to argue whether it was a great fish or a whale, or how any existing creature in the sea could have held Jonah alive in its belly for 3 days and 3 nights, because this is a special order creature that God has prepared for this purpose. Jonah's name means dove, and the dove is connected to another seafaring story, isn't it? Because it was the dove that brought back the olive branch to Noah to let him know it was safe to leave the ark, and that rightness and that peace had been made with God, that sin had been purged. And so there are all these connections to other stories, Old and New Testament, seafaring stories, stories about, you know, sin being taken away, and God bringing salvation, that the Jonah story connects to. It's just an amazing first chapter, and I love. It reminds me a lot of the shipwreck at the end of the book of Acts. The Bible contains the oldest records of seafaring and seafaring practices, written, let me say written records, anywhere in history. So that's an interesting piece of information, just historically as well. We'll pick up with chapter 2 and what happens in the belly of the whale, the big fish, next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.